Hello, guys, and welcome to Key, a youth-based platform that goes live every week, and we bring people together from all walk of life to discuss burning issues within our environment. So today, I'll be broadcasting from Strasbourg, Vermont, the USA, and I'll be having a guest from the New Community Project, where I'm currently interning. But today, I'm officially the host for the show because my official host is not present, and join us and ask questions as usual. You can make questions, you can make comments, suggestions, and share your views on the topic. And we'll be glad to answer your questions, and he will be glad to answer your questions. So our host will introduce himself within a few minutes. And I'm your host for today. My name is Fatou M. Kabat, and welcome to the platform. So today we have Mr. Can you introduce yourself and tell our guests who you are?
My name is Pete Antos Ketchum with the New Community Project.
Okay, so his name is Pete Anto Sketches, and for short, I call him Pete. So today we'll be discussing a topic on climate change, and our theme is how can we contribute to the fight against global warming while creating a compassionate and sustainable life for both ourselves and the biodiversity of our climate. So you, like I just said, you can ask questions, and I'm also going to be asking him my own questions, and hopefully he'll be able to answer our questions and see how best we can all contribute to the fight against global warming. So welcome to the show, Pete.
Thank you, Fatou.
So, first of all, can you tell us about yourself and the New Community Project?
About myself. Well, I've lived in, I'm 44 years old. I've lived in Vermont my whole life. I've been working in nonprofit work my whole career, previously with another environmental organization here in Vermont. I started working for New Community Project in 2015.
So, can you tell us about the New Community Project?
Sure. So, New Community Project is a nonprofit organization, or sometimes referred to as a non-governmental organization. It was founded in 2003, and it has there's two parts to our mission. One part is that we like to say we're a small organization with a big goal, which is to change the world. And our more detailed mission statement is that we work for social justice and ecological healing as the way to build a foundation for a more peaceful and nonviolent world.
When you say social justice and ecological healing, what are you talking about?
So what I'm talking about with social justice is the idea of equity and fairness for everyone, and making sure that we have an ecological healing, that is to try to restore the damage to our natural environment and to create new ways of living that don't damage the earth.
Okay. So, who funded the New Community Project, and how did you get started with it?
So, New Community Project was founded by our director, David Radcliffe, back in 2003. And David Radcliffe came to New Community Project from the Church of the Brethren, where he was working in their overseas program. So he had been traveling the world and working with different partner groups in different places connected to the church. And he wanted to expand beyond the social aspect of the church, include environmental. Part of how the Community Project came to be. There are folks who are part of our board of directors, or our board of directors helped to create the organization from the get-go. So there are several individuals involved there.
So, how did you get started?
I got started because after 20 plus years of working for another nonprofit organization, I was really interested, that was focused on the environment. I was interested in trying to, I saw that social justice issues and environmental issues often overlapped or intersect when you start pulling them apart and looking at them more closely. And I was looking for an organization that would allow me to explore more deeply where those things come together. And that's through a previous connection with a New Community Project employee named Tom Benevento. I got connected to the organization. And at that time, New Community Project did not have any presence in the northeastern United States, and the organization was looking to expand their um, scope of influence to different parts of the country. And so I wrote them a proposal to start a program here.
You wrote them a proposal.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's nice. So wait, is it that anyone can just join new community project, or are there like specific people that connected with the new community project?
To our network, we're a very small organization as far as our number of people that are employed by the group. Um, so it just so happened that they were looking to do an expansion at the time that I was interested in making a change. So as far as that, for my own personal situation connecting to the organization.
Does the NCP serve anyone?
Does it serve anyone? It serves humanity. I mean, that's our goal, is to figure out how to live in this world in a way that honors the integrity of our natural systems that support the life on this planet, and to live in a way where everybody has a chance, an equal chance, at a decent and dignified life.
So you spoke of climate change and environment. So can you tell us briefly tell what is climate change? Because people will just hear it and I'll say, oh, the change of the weather within a particular period of time. But can you tell what is climate change and why is it causing so much problem to our environment?
Well, I think to be clear with the terminology, I mean, climate change, the climate has always changed, and so we have to be clear that what we're talking about when we say climate change, or as I prefer to refer to it as climate chaos, because that's what's happening, is the increase in in the amounts of gases in the atmosphere that trap heat on the planet, and those gases, things like water vapor and carbon dioxide and methane and chlorofluorocarbons and other that are being released in greater quantities in the atmosphere because of human activities, primarily the combustion of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas, to create energy for the countries that are industrialized or are industrializing. Their use of those fuels is upsetting the natural chemistry of the atmosphere, and by doing so is trapping more heat, and by trapping more heat, it's disrupting the normal climate functions.
Okay, disrupting our normal climate function.
Mm-hmm.
So what compelled you to work for the new community project and against global warming?
Well, I've always been interested in protecting the environment. Ever since I was a young person, I think that has a lot to do with where I live, where I'm very close to the natural world, and I spent a lot of time in the natural world growing up. And so I've always had a sense of compassion for caring for it. As far as more currently, and particularly with the issue of climate change, as I see, climate change or climate chaos is the most serious threat ever to face humans. And what compelled me to get involved in the New Community Project was that I didn't see a lot of organizations in this particular area really focusing in on what seems to be the best solutions to address climate change, and B, that they weren't paying attention to that human component of it all, how to integrate the need to improve justice and equity for everyone, as well as addressing environmental issues. So it was really important to me to find where those two things come together, and then look for creative solutions around me and try to make a difference.
So would you mind telling us some of the outcomes of global warming if attentions are not put to it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's all predictions based on scientific modeling about what may happen. No one knows for sure, but we can already see that with the temperature having increased by 1.5 degrees since the Industrial Revolution period in the 19th century, we're already seeing more extreme weather events, more droughts, more floods, for us here in the Northeast, more periods of extreme cold. As heat is trapped in the Arctic, it displaces cold air that normally belongs up at the North Pole and brings it down here, creating extreme conditions, which can be dangerous for people who are not properly protected from the cold. Um, and it really, I see our food supply is in jeopardy. And you look at different countries around the world um, that are not, are either not industrialized or in pre-industrial states that are very dependent on direct from their fields to eating. They don't have the sort of global food supply system that the United States and Europe utilizes, whereby if we have a drought in one part of our country and there's a crop failure, people are in danger of starving because food can be imported from other places. But that's not the case for many countries around the world. If they lose their crops, they may starve or they will starve. And so what's happening with climate change, particularly in places like around the equator, is you are seeing the rainy seasons that farmers depend on are coming later or not coming at all or coming sporadically. And that's really affecting people's ability to have access to food. So I see climate change as being a direct threat to our continued survival on this planet, all of us.
Okay, so spoke about climate change and impact on food. So will you say the industrial agriculture or industrialization as a whole is contributing to climate change and global warming? And if so, how would how are they contributing? Because people say industrialization, people produce food in abundance and people have access to more food, but how will you say that's connected to global warming?
Um, Industrial agriculture is completely and wholly dependent on fossil fuel energies for the inputs. Once you reach a certain scale of food production, you need fossil fuels for fertilizers because you're no longer able to provide that level of fertilization to fields so large through traditional organic soil-based methods. And you're reliant on fossil fuels for large tractors and other machinery in order to process and harvest all that food. So on the one hand, you may be creating more food in the short term, but at the expense of long-term food security for the world as you contribute more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere through combustion of those fuels.
So there's a question that says, what would be the solution? But Ahmed, I'll please beg for us to take that question last so we can go through a few of the questions because as we talk about the causes and then we can go to the effect. So thank you for the question and we will get back to you, make sure he answered the question. So thank you, Pete, for that wonderful answer. And so personal, so I'll ask you again, what compel you to fight for it? I I agree. We say, oh, it's humanity, it's our environment. Was it a particular thing that put you?
Um, well, I'd say my spiritual beliefs have a lot to do with why I work in the work that I do.
Tell us about your spiritual
Well, I
beliefs.
think through I'm a Quaker, which is a branch of Christianity, and if you interpret the Bible and instructions the way I do, it's very clear that we are meant to care for God's creation or our earth. We're supposed to be stewards of it, and we're not doing a very good job of that. We are making a mess of things, and that is in contradiction to what we're called to do by God. So that is a compelling reason to try to engage in this work to try to make things better. I also have young children, and I'm concerned about the world that they are going to inhabit, as well as their children and my descendants. Um, I enjoy being alive. I don't
We
want
all do.
I don't want to see the world, and I don't want to see people suffer because certain cultures on this earth choose convenience through their abundant energy consumption over the well-being of everyone on the planet.
So why do you think sustainable agriculture is one of it's important in the fight against global warming?
Well, first and foremost, we all need to eat, so food production is very important. And then because it's such a agriculture, industrial agriculture, is a large contributor to climate change, and in its effort to produce a lot of food very cheaply, is causing more climate change through its release of carbon dioxide.
In an
So
effort to produce food more cheaply.
right, right. So I see the need to reinvent and reimagine how we produce food for ourselves in a way that doesn't contribute to climate change the way industrial agriculture does.
So, will you also say like big industries, or even personally, we how do we individually, or maybe our big institutions or industries
Hmm.
contribute to
Hmm.
the exploiting of the earth?
Hmm.
So, like mining or deforestation, can
Hmm.
you tell us about them?
Any of those systems that consume large quantities of resources to produce, mass-produced products for the marketplace are going to have an adverse impact on the environment.
When you
So,
say mass produced product, what are you like trying to tell us?
I mean, anything that's produced in great quantity to meet a market demand in the world, like steel for automobiles or other, metal components for manufacturing, um, consumer goods, clothing. I mean, all these things that historically people produced on a small scale on their own, from resources in their immediate environment, are now being produced on a large scale, and the energy that it takes to do that is largely coming from fossil fuels and using non-renewable earth-based resources. And that you mentioned mining, and that's a big part of it. I mean, there's only so many of these resources. The earth is not making any more of it. These resources, and if trees is probably the one exception. We can grow more trees, but we are consuming trees at a rate faster than the earth is replacing them.
So, okay, NCP is a non-profit or
Hmm.
non-governmental organization, as you
Hmm.
mentioned earlier. So, how do you manage to be able to farm for like farm to produce food for your environment? How do you get funding? Can you tell us about them? And
Mm.
how do you make it through working for a non-for-profit? Because like non-for-profit often don't make money as compared to for-profit organizations,
Hmm.
and it takes a lot for a person to be willing to commit their life to such a cause. Can you tell us?
Mm. Well, let's just talk about how New Community Project funds its work. We are largely, I mean, the majority of the funding for the organization comes from individual donations. So we have 11,000 people that are part of our network,
Okay.
around both the United States and around the world. And a portion of those people contribute money to help us do our work. So that's where the majority of the funding comes from. And here in Vermont, for my program here locally, I raise money through writing to grants to charitable foundations. So I make requests, I make proposals to organizations that are philanthropic that donate money to causes that align with their mission. And so if I find organizations where we have a compatible mission, and then I reach out to them and apply for funding, and then that provides funding to do our work here.
So, okay, you get money through donations. Does it also contribute to food share? Can you tell us about food share?
So our food share program or food pantry that we do here in Starksboro, the food for that is all donated by the store we work with, which is Trader Joe's. And then the money that I raise money through grants to help to pay for the garden component of our. So for all of the seeds and tools and resources, and being able to have wonderful people like yourself come and stay with us for a chunk of the summer to help us do our work, those grants help to pay for those costs.
Okay. So, I mean, that's amazing. Will you tell us what have been some of the challenges you faced personally and how have you overcome them?
Mm. Well, I don't know that I mean, I can talk about some challenges. I don't know that they've all been overcome. I mean, it's sort of ongoing because we know that climate change continues to be a big problem. I think, I mean, obviously having the financial resources necessary to meet all the different needs that when you spend time working in a particular place and you start to get to know people in your community, you start to learn more about the different issues and challenges that are out there and needs. And sometimes I think a challenge is that I hear about needs and I don't have the capacity to help, and that's a challenge. Uh, so if I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough time, or I have enough people to be able to address those particular needs, that can be hard. Because we we want to be able to help, but we don't always have what we need to do it. So that's a challenge. Um, I think getting people to engage in the conversations necessary to really address the root causes of climate change, which, in speaking about the United States, is really our high consumption lifestyle that we have here, the amount of energy and resources that we consume as individuals, is very, very high and disproportionate to the rest of the world. We're 5% of the world's population, and we use a quarter of the world's resources and energy. And that's A, it's unsustainable, and B, it's unfair. And so I think it can be challenging to get people to re-examine what it is they really need to have in this life to feel full and abundant, just people, and consuming much energy resources.
Okay.
It's a challenge.
Speaking of justice and being unfair to other people around the world, I mean, not everybody will take it that way to say, "Oh, I'm being unfair. I should manage the resources I use." But I think that's really amazing that people get to talk about it and also get to think about it. So, okay, we've settled what is climate change and all of these things. Can you tell us what you think people can do within their environment or maybe their place of work to reduce the problem of climate change?
It really comes down to how much we consume. So we have to take a step back and look at our personal lives and look at what, and you have to balance, what is it we really need to have a productive life. We need food, and we need shelter, we need clean water. I mean, those are some of the basic fundamental elements of things. We need access to healthcare, education. But when you start getting beyond those things, when you start looking at things people are simply consuming for pleasure or joy, that have a high impact on the environment. That's when we have to start to re-examine, what it is we really need. And when we can take a step back and think about living more simply and more in line with what the earth can actually tolerate. We have to remember that the planet right now, because of industrialization and because of our accessing the stored energy available within fossil fuels, we've caused the Earth's population to go much higher than it could naturally sustain. 7.5 billion people heading towards 10 billion people is a far greater number than the Earth can actually sustainably handle. It's only been possible because of our access to fossil fuels and the ability to, the medicine that we've been able to create because of that access to that energy, and the industrial food system that has allowed the population to grow to that level. And it's not fundamentally a sustainable number. So we have to understand that, that we've made those choices, but we need to start thinking about, okay, if using these energy sources is disrupting the climate and risking life on the planet, and we need to stop using those energy sources, then we need to think about how can we live in a way, if we have this many people on the planet, how can we live in a way that's simple enough that there's enough resources for everybody to go around, knowing that we can't artificially live beyond the means of the planet, what it can provide.
So, can you tell us about how energy conservation and water conservation contribute to the reduction of global warming or climate change?
Sure. I mean, it takes tremendous amount of resources, particularly with a more developed area, to provide water, to bring clean water, to clean it, to pressurize it, to deliver it to homes. It takes a lot of energy, and then on the other side of things, to clean the water up if the water is dirty, through a municipal sewage system, takes a lot of energy as well. But energy conservation. So conserving water helps conserve energy and conserve clean water, so that there's enough for everybody. right? So everybody needs water, clean water to drink. So, is it really the highest and best use of clean water to, for example, use it in a flush toilet and mix it with waste and pollute it and then flush it away and then have to spend a lot of energy and money and time to clean the water up again? Or people, the way people use their, whether they're watering grass or they're washing a car. I mean, you just have to think about like what's really important to do with water. um, and then energy conservation in itself. If your energy sources are polluting and based on fossil fuels, then the less you use, the less you're contributing to pollution. So I think that's one of the things I really appreciate about New Community Project and its message is that it's not about you know some people would have you believe that in order for you to reduce your impact on climate change, it's all about you have to drive an electric car, or you have to have all these big solar panels and spend all this money on all these different things. And it's really actually much more about just the choices you make in everyday life and how do you use less and still feel a sense of joy and abundance within your life. And anybody can do that. Doesn't mean rich or poor. You can do that by making those choices.
So does wealth play any part in living a life that is not necessarily luxury, but also, okay, I don't know how to put this question, but does wealth determine how much energy we use and how much damage we cause to our environment, or is it our individual selves?
Well, it's all about personal choice, but I think there's been some strong research done that there is a correlation between the amount of wealth or access to resources somebody has and their propensity to use them and to contribute more to environmental damage. It's not to say that everybody does that. You can't make a blanket statement like that. But there have been studies that show that there's an increasing, your capacity to consume increases, your environmental footprint increases.
So, will you say the natural disasters that have been going on more frequently, like the cyclone, the flooding, changing weather pattern, are they all contributing to global warming or climate change? And how do we, because someone would say, oh, maybe it's just the environment or the earth is doing its own thing, but how will you be able to educate people on that, and
right,
so they can be able to watch their steps?
Right. Well, the science is very clear about when you increase the concentrations of those gases in the atmosphere, what that does to trapping heat. And when you have more heat, that means the ability for the atmosphere to hold more moisture, for example. So while there's always been hurricanes and cyclones, with increased moisture in the atmosphere and changing wind patterns through increased heat, you can then so these things have always happened, but what climate change does is it comes in and it supercharges these events. So like the hurricane that hit Texas last year, instead of moving along with the winds, what we're seeing now is that these systems just stop and they'll sit over a particular area for days and days and dump, unbelievable amounts of rain, just several feet of rain and cause all kinds of flooding and damage. So it increases the impact of these. So these events are natural, but they get increased. Their ability to do damage and the way they are and the frequency with which they're occurring is how climate change influences them.
The influence of climate change on our water pattern. Okay, that's really cool to know. So I feel like we have gone through most of the questions, and also like I may ask about solution, but I think I'll say individual impacts, because most of our audience are like situated within Liberia and some part of Africa. So how will you say to them that, okay, maybe I recommend that you do this, or maybe I recommend that you do that,
right,
that you can be able to do as an individual and manage, and also be able to contribute to the sustainability of our environment?
Well, I'll be completely honest with you, Fatu, that I don't always feel very comfortable making recommendations to what people in other parts of the world should do. I'm most acutely aware of what my culture is doing to the environment and understand our responsibilities here. I guess what I would, the bigger picture thing that I could speak to would be that people who are in other countries who are looking to move, um, develop more to provide basic services and needs to their population should just look at, understand what are the limits, and to not see we've surpassed, what we've done in the United States and in Europe is we've surpassed the limits. We're borrowing from the future to live well to live well today in our perception of living well, and it's like, taking money from the savings account to, throw a big party today rather than saving your money for what you need going forward in the future. And so I guess my hope and my dream is that we can find a way to address the issues that other countries feel are important to address in their own needs, for food security and healthcare and education, to be able to meet those things, but to do so in a way that doesn't follow the exact model of industrialization that the United States followed, because it's created all these problems and it's affecting everyone. I think one only has to look to maybe countries like China or India, where they're trying to follow that industrial pattern. Just, so basically China is going through its own industrial revolution like the United States and Europe did in the 19th century, and to do so, to meet for their size population, is releasing tremendous amounts of pollution into the environment, and having a devastating effect through their combustion, particularly their combustion of coal to create electricity.
So, can you talk a little about pollution and unmanaged waste? And because I personally can relate to the fact that I came from an environment that we hardly recycle. Most of the time, we have waste on the street, and they
Mm-hmm.
are not properly taken care of or treated.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us how they are like contributing to the problems?
Well, I guess I need to ask you a question back, which is, at what point in Liberia's development did the waste stream change from more traditional, to all of a sudden, because humans are the only species on the planet that make garbage, and up until we started introducing these industrially produced products like plastic and glass and metal, these things that don't break down readily in the environment on their own, are things that are, coated with toxic chemicals, so they're dangerous to dispose of. Was garbage a problem? You go back in this country, you go back 100 years, and there really was people didn't really have much in the way of garbage. People, the people built, first of all, we built things to last, so we weren't part of what, people refer to our society now as a throwaway society. So I have a pair of boots that I depend on very heavily to work outside, right? Because this is a very wet place. We have snow, we have rain, but those boots are made in a way, we don't have people that fix shoes and boots anymore, right? My great grandfather, when his leather boots that he wore farming got a hole in them or need to be fixed, he could take them to the town cobbler, and the cobbler would fix them, and he'd wear them, like, for more and more time. These boots I have, once I can no longer keep them glued and taped together because they're falling apart, they're going to have to go in the trash can, and they're made out of materials that are not, they can't be fixed. So we've designed this system whereby the cheapest way to provide goods and services means that we're producing a lot of waste that the environment can't naturally break down and absorb again.
It's not about the waste, but it's about the environment's ability to absorb or like recycle it or break it down.
It's our material culture. We have so many more things, and we're creating all these products that are single use instead of reusable over and over again, and they get thrown away, and they're not biodegradable, so they can't be naturally, um, put back into the environment. What little waste that my great grandparents, for example, would have made on the farm, they could have put in a small little corner of their property in a dump, and it would have been it would break down over time and disappear. I mean, I'm sure that we could go and find where the dump was, but there'd be very little left in it now. 100 years later. Um, so I think we need to look at it's part of our material culture. We need to look at, how do we meet our daily needs, our daily arrangements for living, without relying on non-renewable resources and products that are used once and thrown away.
So most of the time I see people like talk about deforestation within the environment and how it's contributing. I mean, I even volunteer for a non-for-profit that says Plant for the Planet. Can you tell us the impact of trees or plants within the environment and how do they also contribute to the solution?
Well, trees are what produce oxygen that we all need to breathe. Just like we need to eat, we also need to breathe. And so trees are the lungs of the planet. And so if we are removing those at a rate faster than they can regrow on their own, that will eventually have consequences for us. So trees are very important. And so we need to be thinking about how do we reduce our need for trees, so we're not cutting them down at a rate faster than they can grow back on their own. And we need to look at where we can replant trees and ensure that they get a chance to live. And trees also help to regulate and moderate our climate. So we have a group that we partner with that's in Malawi, in Southeast Africa, and they have been having a lot of deforestation, and the more that they take away trees, the more their soil that they can use for farming gets poorer, because there's nothing to, the winds come through and blow away the soil. There's no root structures to hold soil, so heavy rainfalls from climate change, like supercharged rainfalls, are causing more erosion. So trees help to stabilize the climate and stabilize the ground around them. And so when you start clearing them away, that's how you can actually start to create deserts in certain places. So it's really important to minimize removing trees, and then where they can be replanted, to replant them. It's essential.
Okay, planting of trees. I hope you guys are following, and I can see we have a lot of new people joining. Also, can you tell us about, you spoke about Malawi. Is the new community project an international organizations, and what do you do in other countries? Can you at least tell us about your work in other parts of the world?
Sure. So New Community Project has sort of three distinct ways that we work. We do work internationally. We work in, I guess we're in now working in 9 different countries around the world. And we have 2 ways we work internationally. One is that we take people to different places where we work, on what are called learning tours. For example, right now, New Community Project is leading a learning tour to New Mexico, in the desert southwest of the United States, where there's a group right now that is spending time with listening to and hearing from and witnessing what's going on the ground with the Dene, who are an indigenous community in the United States, also sometimes known as the Navajo, but they call themselves the Dene. And they are under a lot of pressure right now from fracking, which is a industrial method for extracting oil and gas out of the ground. And so their livelihood and their lands and their way of life is very much in threat right now from fracking. So we have a group there right now that's there to see what's happening on the ground, and the purpose of the learning tour is for people to it's to provide solidarity to the people that we are with, but it's also for our participants to hopefully be personally transformed and changed by the experience of witnessing what's going on the ground, and hopefully come back and want to make changes in their own life based on what they're seeing. So so when they come back and see the effects firsthand of what fracking is having on these communities, they will look to ways that they can reduce their own use of fossil fuels in their life, which is what's driving that impact. So we do these learning tours. So we go to a lot of different places. We're Ecuadorian Amazon. We're up on the north slopes of the United States of Alaska, up near the Arctic Circle. I mentioned the Dene in the desert southwest. We work in the Dominican Republic, over in Africa, in South Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. and now Malawi and Zimbabwe are two other places where we're working. We also work up in Nepal and also Myanmar. And when I say we work there, we take these learning tours of people coming from the United States to these places, but we also partner with non-governmental organizations that are on the ground in those locations that are working to address issues of justice and environment in those places. And what we do is we help to capacitate those organizations. So we raise funds, and then those organizations tell us what their needs are, and then we help to provide funds to support them. So whether it's planting trees in Malawi, or it's helping to build a school for girls to help foster girls' education, a boarding school in South Sudan. It could be working with helping to rehabilitate and reintegrate victims of the sex trade in Nepal. Could be with being in solidarity with the people who are working in the sugar plantations in the Dominican Republic, the indigenous Kofan people in the Ecuadorian Amazon. These are all places where the earth and the people that live there are in crisis because of the demands that the Western way of life is placing on the earth. We're extracting something from these places, whether it's a human toll or an environmental toll or both, and that's what we're trying to address through capacitating these local organizations and by bringing people there to witness what's going on the ground, to hopefully be personally transformed to come back here to make change and address that issue of overconsumption.
You spoke of girls' education. How does the empowerment or education of girls contribute to the idea of sustainable environment or reduction in global warming?
Right. It's been well documented. It's nothing that New Community Project necessarily discovered or invented by any stretch of the imagination, but that when you are able to provide education and then also economic opportunities for women, that overall because women tend to be in most places in the world tend to be home based within their village and sort of are more sort of the foundational pillars of their community. If you can provide them the means to be better educated, they tend to marry. They don't get married quite as young. They tend to have fewer children. We talked about overpopulation earlier. That creates both local and global, has both local and global consequences where population is concerned. There just tends to be better outcomes overall for people. I think a good example would be so there was in Myanmar several years ago, they were hit by a very bad cyclone called Cyclone Nargis, and it was a cyclone that was supercharged by climate change. And by capacitating women in that place, they were able to work to develop a cyclone shelter for their community. The women tend to be very community focused, and they tend to be the leaders when it comes to coming up with these types of solutions. So it's really important to make sure that they have the education and the resources that they need to be able to contribute to the betterment of where they are.
Hey guys, are you guys learning? Because I am definitely learning a lot of things. And for those who are just joining the show, I'm sure you read the post about the team. However, our theme for today's discussion is how can we contribute to the fight against global warming while creating a compassionate and sustainable environment for both ourselves and the biodiversity of our planet. And today we have Mr. Antonius. Okay, so and he has talked about a lot of different ways in which we can all contribute to the fight against global warming, because like I once said in a part of my article, that it's not just a single country's issue, but rather the planet's issue, and every single country or person have their own share of the problem. And I'm a victim of climate change, so I feel really passionate about talking about this topic. And you can ask questions, give suggestions, or share your own view on the topic. And we have talked about global warming, looking at your own life and seeing how you can be able to take initiative within your environment, your school, your home, and say, I'm going to do this to fight for climate change or to fight against global warming. And he also mentioned about girls' education. And I mean, someone once told me that I'm very feminist in my talking, so I feel like that was like a plus for me. And also talked about the planting of trees and their impact in our environment. and the management of waste and pollution within our environment. We also talk about energy and water conservation, and we also talk about compassion within our environment and how to be able to create a more sustainable agriculture that will be able to benefit our environment and not harm our environment as we try to improve our lives or our communities. So I'll just we'll be going now because we're almost like out of time. But before I leave, I'll ask Mr. Antonio to give us a parting comment or recommendations for our audience so that they can be able to at least I listened to the entire show, but what's one thing I left with? So can you give us your parting comment?
I guess my parting comment would be I would invite anybody who's listening to this podcast or will be viewing it later or listening to it later to invite you to figure out how to join in this effort to save our environment. Because as Fatu said, this issue, particularly climate change, knows no boundaries. We are one global ecosystem. What one part of the world does to the ecosystem in their location has implications for the rest of the world. And so we need everybody on board to help address this challenge. If we don't all work at this, we're not going to be able to make it right. So I would encourage you to check out New Community Project's website, which is New Community Project, one word.
I can share with them.
.org, and learn more about us as an organization, and what resources we have available to people. And if you have further questions, to get in touch. We're always happy to make connections with people from around the world to discuss important issues that are happening right in your backyard and happening to our collective global backyard.
Okay, guys, so thank you for joining our podcast and thank you for allowing me to interview you. I learned a lot and I've been learning for over a month now, and it's been really interesting. So I just shared the link of New Community Project in the comment section, so you can just click it and be able to follow New Community Project and know some of the things they do, and they'll be glad to help you figure out some ways or initiative you can do it, like individually or within your environment, to work against climate change. It was really nice being with you, and I love the fact that I came to be with you today, and I hope to see you next Saturday. Thank you for following on, and see you next week. Bye bye.